On the night the river woke up, Zuri was the only one foolish enough to be outside to hear it breathing. The elders always said no one should go near Adaora after sunset, not even to wash their hands, but Zuri had never been good at obeying warnings wrapped in fear instead of explanation. The moon hung low and swollen, like a calabash full of secrets about to spill, and the path to the river was lined with palm trees that seemed to lean in as she walked, their fronds whispering above her head. She had followed a sound she couldn't explain, soft humming like a lullaby being sung underwater, layered with something that felt like crying. At first she thought it was the wind, then maybe some late fisher paddling home, but the closer she got, the more it felt like the sound was calling her by name, curling around her ears like smoke. Zuri! Zuri! It wasn't words, not exactly, but her spirit heard her name. When she stepped out of the last line of trees, the river lay before her, dark and wide, its surface smooth as black glass. There, near the center, a pale shape glowed softly, like a lantern floating above the water. Zuri squinted. Not a lantern. A woman. No, not a woman. A creature with a woman's upper body and the gleaming tail of a fish flickering weakly beneath the water. She was tied to a black rock by ropes that shimmered like wet moonlight, glowing faintly blue. Zuri's breath caught in her throat. The creature's long hair fanned out in the water like a halo of ink, and her eyes, big, bright, and strangely old, fixed on Zuri with desperate hunger. "You came," the mermaid said, her voice echoing inside Zuri's whole body instead of in her ears. "I called, and you came." Zuri should have turned back. She knew stories of river spirits who lured people to watery graves with sweet voices and beautiful faces. But this one did not look dangerous. She looked tired, the way women in the market looked after carrying loads all day in the sun. "Who are you?" Zuri whispered, stepping closer to the bank. The mud was cool between her toes, and the air smelled of wet earth, palm oil, and something metallic, like blood. "I am Maziwa, keeper of secrets, owner of this river," the mermaid replied, her voice a low vibration, half song and half sigh. "Once I swam freely from one end of Odoajo to the other, and people respected the water. They poured libations, spoke truth here, and never washed their lies in my body. But your people forgot." She tugged weakly at the glowing ropes, and Zuri noticed the way they burned into her skin. "Someone tied you there?" Zuri asked, her curiosity stronger than her fear. Her mother always said curiosity would one day put her inside a story the griots would shake their heads about. "Who would tie a spirit?" Maziwa laughed, a sound that made the water tremble. "Who else but humans? Your people wanted a silent river, a river that swallowed secrets without murmuring, a river that carried away guilt without complaint. So they came with a powerful Dibia, a man who knew the old ways but used them for selfish gain. They sold me with offerings and promises, tied me to this stone, and turned my river into a graveyard for truth." Zuri's chest tightened. She thought of all the times people whispered near the water, the way lovers met by the riverbank and swore no one would ever know, the way men discussed stolen land, the way women cried over mistreatment, letting their tears fall into the water. The river had always felt thick with things unspoken. "Why are you calling me?" Zuri asked. "I am not a chief's daughter. I'm not even the firstborn. If you need someone powerful—" "I need someone disobedient," Maziwa cut in gently. "Someone who still listens to whispers the elders pretend not to hear. Someone whose name was spoken the day the bargain was made." Zuri froze. "My name? But I was not there." "You were in your mother's womb," the mermaid said. "And your father stood on this very bank, his feet sunk in mud, when he agreed to silence me in exchange for what he wanted most: power and a clean, respectable image. He asked that truth never rise up against him. The Dibia warned him, 'The river will remember, and so will your children's children.' But your father nodded as if he knew better than water." Zuri's heart pounded so hard she wondered if the river could hear it. Her father? Chief Adamu, respected elder, landowner, the man whose voice people lowered their heads to hear, the one who wore white agbada and gold wrist beads and pretended his hands were as clean as his clothes. "You're lying," Zuri whispered, but the word tasted weak. The mermaid's eyes softened. "I am many things, child of Adamu, but I am not a liar. These ropes that bind me are woven with your family's name, twisted with oaths and sealed with blood. That is why only you can untie me. That is why I have been humming your name every midnight since your spirit grew strong enough to hear." Zuri swallowed, her throat dry. "If I free you, what happens?" Maziwa's eyes darkened like storm clouds rolling over water. "If you free me, the river will wake fully. Odo Ajo will remember every secret that has been poured into it. Your people love to talk near the river, to confess to the water, but hide from each other. They think the river is a mute witness. It is not. It is only bound." She smiled, and Zuri felt both warmth and dread in that curve of her lips. "If you free me, the river will demand payment in secrets. Every lie will grow a voice. Every hidden thing will seek the light. No one will be able to wash their sins away quietly again. Are you ready for that?" The breeze picked up, tugging at Zuri's wrapper, making the palm trees sway harder. She thought of her village, calm on the surface but full of whispers underneath. She thought of her mother's sudden silence whenever she asked about her father's old life. She thought of the way her father avoided the river, even on hot days when everyone else went to bathe. "And my family?" Zuri asked, her words barely more than a breath. "What happens to them?" "The river always starts with those who made the bargain," Maziwa replied. "The first secrets to rise will be your father's. Then the rest will follow, like crabs crawling out of a broken basket." Zuri's hands clenched. It was not her fault that her father had made such a deal. It was not her choice to be born with her name tied around a spirit's wrists. Yet here she was, standing at the edge of the river at midnight, being asked to decide the fate of an entire village whose people didn't even know she was there. "Help me, Zuri," the mermaid said quietly. "I will not promise you safety. I will not promise your family's honor. I can only promise you truth, and truth, once freed, never goes back to sleep." Zuri stared at the glowing ropes, at the faint burn marks on Maziwa's pale arms. The humming in her head grew louder, mixing with the distant chorus of frogs and crickets. Something inside her, something that had never trusted the perfection of her father's reputation, rose up like a wave. Before fear could change her mind, she stepped into the water. It was warmer than she expected, curling around her ankles like welcoming hands. "Tell me what to do," she said. "Tell me how to free you." The mermaid's eyes shone with a light that came from somewhere deeper than the moon. "You must speak what no one in your family has dared to say aloud." Maziwa whispered, "You must offer your own secret first." Zuri's first thought was almost funny, if the air around her hadn't grown so heavy. "My own secret," she muttered, wading deeper into the river until the water reached her knees, the hem of her wrapper clinging to her legs. "What secret? I'm the one everyone scolds for saying too much. I don't hide anything." Maziwa watched her with those wide, patient eyes that made her feel as if she were transparent, like the river could see the inside of her skull. "That's the trick with secrets," the mermaid said. "The deepest ones live in places you don't look. You carry a secret in your blood, a truth you have felt but never dared to form into words. You fear what it will sound like if you say it aloud." Zuri's chest tightened. The river water seemed to thicken, pressing against her skin. She thought of all the moments that made no sense in her life. The way her father never let her fetch water from the river as a child. The way he refused to eat food cooked with river fish. The way he avoided swimming even though he grew up beside this same water. She remembered the day she had asked why she didn't look like her siblings, with their lighter skin and straight noses, while hers was broad and her hair tighter. That question had earned her a sharp slap from her mother and a warning look from her father. "Not all children resemble their parents," her mother had said, but the anger behind her voice had sounded like fear instead. "That question is not for you." Zuri had never asked again, but the question never left her. Now it rose like a bubble in her throat. "My secret is that," she faltered, her tongue suddenly heavy. The river held its breath. Even the insects seemed to hush. "Say it," Maziwa urged gently, the glowing ropes around her wrists flickering. "Give your truth to the river. Let it taste your courage." Zuri shut her eyes. Images flashed behind them, her father's gold wrist beads, his proud smile when people praised his fairness, her mother's tired eyes, the way they always looked away when he walked into a room, the way some elders lowered their voices when she passed, as if they were standing near something fragile and dangerous. My secret, Zuri whispered, the words trembling out of her at last, is that I don't believe Chief Adamu is really my father. The sentence hung in the air like a drumbeat. The moment it escaped her lips, the river responded. The water around her shivered, sending ripples outward in perfect circles. A cold streak shot up her spine, as if someone had poured ice into her bones. The moonlight seemed to sharpen, outlining every leaf, every stone, every breath of mist above the river. Maziwa sighed, and the glowing ropes dimmed for a second, as if some portion of their power had loosened. "There," the mermaid said. "You have broken the first thread. Truth is a knife, and you have just cut into your own story." Zuri opened her eyes, feeling strangely lighter and heavier at the same time. "But I don't know if it's true," she said quickly, suddenly afraid she had angered the spirits by accusing a man of something so serious without proof. "It's just a feeling. A question. What if I'm wrong?" Maziwa's smile was both kind and cruel. "Rivers do not care whether humans are comfortable," she answered. "They care whether humans are honest. You did not swear that your suspicion is fact. You only admitted that it lives in you. That is enough. Now the river can answer you, but first, I must deal with those who made it swallow silence." She pulled at the ropes again, and this time Zuri saw them visibly fray, thin strands of shimmering light snapping soundlessly. "Come closer, child," Maziwa commanded. "You must touch the knot. Your blood is woven into it. Your touch can unmake what your father made." Zuri swallowed and waded forward until she was waist-deep in the water. It clung to her like hands holding her back, asking if she was sure she wanted to walk into a story that could not be unwritten. She ignored the warning and reached out. Her fingers brushed the glowing knot where all the ropes intertwined at Maziwa's waist. The moment she touched it, a jolt of energy shot through her, and suddenly she was not standing in the river anymore. She was somewhere else entirely. She saw a younger version of her father standing on the riverbank, bare-chested, his hair still black instead of touched with gray. Beside him stood a man with cowrie shells woven into his beard, his eyes milky but sharp, his hands stained with chalk and palm oil, the Dibia. Her father's voice trembled as he said, "I am tired of the river, Dibia. It hears too much, it knows too much. I do not want my sins floating on its surface, where anyone can smell them. I am not the same foolish boy I once was. I am chief now. I cannot afford old mistakes." The Dibia shook his head. "Water does not forget because you have changed clothes," he replied. "The girls you wronged by this river, the deals you whispered here, does becoming chief wipe them away?" Her father's jaw tightened. "Name your price," he said. "I want a river that keeps its mouth shut. I want the freedom to build my name on dry land. I will give offering." Zuri watched in horror as her father cut his thumb with a blade and let the blood drip into a calabash filled with river water. The Dibia chanted, his voice low and rhythmic, as if he were singing to the bones beneath the earth. "With this blood, you bind your children to this silence," he intoned. "Those yet unborn will carry the weight of your hidden truths unless one of them chooses pain over comfort." "I accept," her father said too quickly. The Dibia looked at him sadly. "You will pay for this, Adamu," he murmured. "Not today, not tomorrow, but one day, the river will send for what it is owed." The vision dissolved like smoke, and Zuri found herself shaking in the water, her hands still on the knot. She yanked it free with a cry, and one of the ropes snapped, dissolving into a mist of blue light that drifted up into the night sky and vanished. The river exhaled. A low, rumbling sound rolled across the surface, like distant thunder or a giant waking up under the earth. "You saw it," Maziwa said softly. "Now you know the truth of your father's bargain. This is only one rope, one secret. There are many more, tied not just to him, but to your people. Each one will require a secret, a confession, an unveiling. Are you ready to stand in the middle of that storm?" Zuri's teeth were chattering, though she wasn't cold. "What happens now?" she whispered. As if in answer, the first strange thing happened in the village. On the far bank near the cluster of fishermen's huts, Zuri saw water footprints, clean, wet marks shaped like bare human feet, walking along the dry ground with no body attached to them. They moved slowly, deliberately, heading toward the path that led back into the village. Maziwa's eyes followed them. "Now," she said, her voice carrying both satisfaction and warning, The river will begin to collect. It will follow every secret spoken within its hearing. It will not stay silent. It will walk among you. Zuri knew then that by freeing even one rope, she had already changed everything. The calm lie of their quiet village was over. Somewhere inside, a new secret was already growing, that she, Zuri, had been the one to answer the river's call, the one to tear the first thread from the web of silence. And as the footprints vanished into the darkness, she understood that her life was no longer her own. It belonged now to a story the river had been waiting years, perhaps generations, to tell. The next morning, the village woke up wrong. It was in small ways at first, things a less observant person would have dismissed as coincidence. But Zuri watched everything with new eyes, every sense sharpened by the memory of the river's exhale and the ghostly footprints on the path. At dawn, the women gathered at the communal well to draw water. Their chatter usually filled the air like birdsong, light and rapid, but today there was a strange echo beneath it, a thin whisper floating just under their voices. At first, Zuri thought it was just her imagination. Then she noticed that every time someone lied, the echo grew louder. "My husband does not drink," one woman said, lifting her bucket. The echo softly repeated, "He drinks, he drinks, he drinks." The woman frowned and looked around, as if hearing something she couldn't locate. "My daughter is still a virgin," another bragged, and the echo hissed, "He has touched her, by the barn, by the barn." Zuri's skin prickled. No one else seemed to fully understand what they were hearing. Some rubbed their ears and complained of a buzzing sound. Others scolded children for humming when no child had made a sound. The whispers faded when people spoke truth or kept silent, but every lie called them forth like a drum summons dancers. Later that day, at the marketplace, something even stranger happened. An argument broke out between Papa Kofi, the palm wine tapper, and Mama Sade, who sold smoked fish. Papa Kofi accused her of watering down the pepper in her stew. Mama Sade clapped her hands and swore by her late mother that she would never do such a thing. As the argument grew heated, the old fig tree in the center of the market began to rustle, though there was no wind. The tree's roots dug deep into the earth near where a small river stream used to flow before people redirected it. "You swear?" Papa Kofi shouted. "Ah, Sade, you swear again! I swear!" she cried dramatically. At that moment, the tree spoke. It wasn't a human voice, not exactly, more like a grinding creak that formed into words. "Lies," it groaned, the sound rising from its trunk and branches. She waters it every market day. She keeps the best pepper stew for her favorite customers." The entire marketplace froze. Yams rolled off a stall. A child started crying, then stopped as soon as everyone turned to stare at the fig tree. Mama Sade dropped her spoon, her face drained of color. "Who said that?" she whispered, clutching her wrapper. Papa Kofi's mouth was hanging open. Zuri's eyes went straight to the ground beneath the tree, where she noticed something only she seemed to see. Tiny tendrils of water snaking up through the soil, curling around the roots like fingers pulling strings. Maziwa was here, not in full form, but in influence. The river had begun to move through the village in ways no one could see, except through its effects. "Have we angered the ancestors?" someone muttered. An old woman crossed herself and clutched her amulet. "This is what happens when people stop respecting the river." Another said, and Zuri felt a stab of guilt. It wasn't just disrespect, it was a bargain, a lock broken, a debt being collected. By evening, the village was buzzing with rumors. Some said they heard fish in their cooking pots repeating conversations from the night before. Others swore that when they tried to whisper gossip in corners, the wind carried their words to the wrong ears. Secrets were slipping. They were like goats whose ropes had been cut, running wild through the streets. That night, as the sky darkened and lamps burned in doorways, Zuri's father called a meeting in the compound. Chief Adamu sat on his carved wooden stool, his white agbada gleaming in the lamplight, gold beads shining at his wrists. His face was calm, but Zuri, watching from the edge of the gathering, saw the tightness at the corners of his mouth. "My people," he said, his voice smooth and authoritative, "I have heard strange reports today, trees speaking, echoes at the well, whispers in the wind. Let me assure you there is nothing to fear. No curse has been placed on this village. No spirit is angry with us. The echo that had followed Zuri around all day stirred beside him, invisible but very much present. There is curse, it murmured in Zuri's ears alone. He is afraid, he is afraid. She swallowed hard. What we have, her father continued, is fear feeding more fear. We will pour libation tomorrow, speak to the ancestors, and this will pass. Until then, I urge you all, no more foolish talk about spirits and trees and gossiping fish. We are a modern people. Zuri almost laughed. Modern. As if the river cared about electricity and iron roofing, as if old spirits retired just because humans discovered radio. After the meeting, as people drifted away, her father caught her eye. Zuri, he called quietly. She walked up to him, feeling like a thief approaching the person she had stolen from, even though she knew he had been the thief first. You've been unusually quiet today, he said. Nothing to say about all this nonsense? Maybe I'm learning to keep my mouth shut, she replied, eyes cool. Isn't that what everyone wants from me? He studied her for a moment too long, as if trying to see if she knew something. For the first time, she noticed something like fear in his eyes. You should sleep early, he said at last. Strange times make people see and hear things that are not there. Don't let it get into your head. But it was already too late. The river was not just in her head. It was under their feet, in their food, in the air between words. That night, Zuri waited until the household was asleep, then slipped out again, following the same path as before. The humming returned, louder now, threaded with voices that sounded like fragments of conversations. A confession about stolen money, a whispered promise of betrayal, a lover's secret vow. The river had become a chorus. When she reached the water's edge, she saw Maziwa still bound, though more of the ropes had thinned, their glow faint. You have been busy, the mermaid said without turning, sensing Zuri's presence. Secrets are restless in your village today. The river is frightening everyone, Zuri snapped, stepping into the water. Trees talking, echoes at the well, people are scared, and my father is trying to cover it up. Maziwa's smile was humorless. Did you think waking truth would feel gentle? Lies are comfortable. They curl around people like warm cloth. Tear away that cloth, and they shiver. They scream. Can't we do this more quietly? Zuri asked, hearing how foolish it sounded even as she spoke. Reveal only the worst secrets, maybe, and leave the small ones alone. The river does not rank secrets, Maziwa said. A small lie can break a life the same way a big one can. Besides, this is only the beginning. Today, whispers and trees. Soon, people will have to face themselves. Zuri sighed, feeling torn between the strange righteousness in her chest and the chaos she knew was coming. You said each rope is tied to a secret, she said. I broke one by confessing my doubt about my father. What about the others? Maziwa dipped her chin toward the far bank, where the path to the wealthy quarter lay. The next rope is tied to stolen land, to a widow whose farm was taken in the name of development, she replied. Her tears have been feeding me for years. The man who holds that land now thinks the river has forgotten. It has not. Zuri's stomach dropped. She knew the land. Everyone did. It was the fertile plot that had once belonged to old Mama Ijeoma, whose husband died without a male heir. A few years ago, the land had been signed over to a development project that never materialized. Instead, it sat under Chief Adamu's control, fenced and guarded. My father again, Zuri whispered. Always your father, Maziwa agreed. He built his house on bones, but he is not the only one. When his secrets start to crack, others will follow. Humans are like palm wine gourds tied together. Shake one, and the rest clang against each other. What do I have to do? Zuri asked, though she already felt the answer forming like a storm cloud over her head. Tomorrow, Maziwa said, you will speak where you are not supposed to. You will stand where your father stands and say what he swore would never be said aloud. And when you do, the second rope will loosen and the river's voice will grow louder. Your village will not like you, Zuri. They will call you disrespectful, possessed, ungrateful, but the river will know your name in a different way. Zuri thought of her mother, of her siblings, of the neighbors who always shook their heads fondly at her stubbornness. Was she ready to become the girl everyone blamed for tearing the roof off their safe lies? The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of the village in the distance. Laughter, clanging plates, a baby's cry. She realized that by dawn, this could all begin to unravel. You ask me for truth. Maziwa reminded her softly. Truth is not a story you watch. It is a knife you hold, and once you hold it, you will cut something, even if you don't mean to. Zuri stared at the glowing ropes and wondered which would break first, the bindings on Maziwa's body or the bindings on her family's carefully woven respect. Either way, she knew there was no turning back. She had already stepped into the river. Now the river was stepping into them. The sun rose with a strange sharpness the next morning, as if even the light wanted to see clearly what would happen. Zuri woke with a dry mouth and a pounding heart, remembering Maziwa's words as if they had been tattooed inside her skull. You will stand where your father stands and say what he swore would never be said aloud. For a brief moment, she considered staying quiet. She could pretend none of it had happened, that she hadn't walked into the river at midnight, that she hadn't seen her father's blood drip into the calabash, binding her unborn life to a spirit's chains. But then she stepped outside and saw something that told her silence was no longer an option. The path to their compound, normally dusty and ordinary, was damp, as if someone had poured a narrow stream of water along it. But there were no puddles, no broken pots, no signs of a spill. The water formed words. Zuri stared, her breath halting. On the ground, glistening in the morning light, the wet trail spelled out in crooked, shining letters, "Debt is due." A chill ran through her. She looked around, expecting someone else to be staring at the ground in horror, but the passers-by stepped right over the message, oblivious. Only she saw it. Only she read it. "So it's like that?" she muttered under her breath. "You're not going to let me pretend, are you?" The water shimmered faintly, almost like a laugh. By mid-morning, the village square filled with people. Rumors had spread overnight. Voices in the well had grown clearer, now repeating exact words instead of murmurs. A man swore he heard his own voice echoing back at him, confessing to stealing from his brother years ago. Children claimed the river fish were telling on them, repeating the sweets they stole and the lies they told to avoid chores. Fear sat in the air like smoke. Chief Adamu called for a general gathering, this time not just in their compound but in the center of the village under the talking fig tree, as people had started calling it. He arrived in full regalia, a long flowing agbada, coral beads at his neck, staff in hand. To anyone else he looked steady, strong, the very image of authority. But Zuri's eyes caught every slight tremor in his fingers, every too quick blink, the way he glanced nervously at the roots of the tree before addressing the crowd. "My people," he began, "I see fear on your faces. I understand. Strange things are happening, but we must not give in to panic or wild superstition. These occurrences are a test. The ancestors are reminding us to be upright, that is all. We will make a general sacrifice at the river and restore peace. Until then, go about your lives, work, trade, marry, celebrate. Do not let fear rule you." The fig tree rustled ominously, but stayed silent. The crowd murmured, some nodding, some unconvinced. Zuri stood at the back, her palms damp, Maziwa's instructions hammering in her ears. "You will stand where your father stands." Her moment was slipping away, and with it the chance to break the second rope. If she stayed quiet, maybe life would patch itself imperfectly, but peacefully. But the truth already felt alive, pacing inside her chest like a trapped animal. She could feel the river watching, waiting. When her father finished speaking and paused, staff raised, ready to dismiss the meeting, Zuri stepped forward. Her voice surprised even her. It came out clear and loud, bouncing off the stone walls around the square. "What about Mama Ijioma's land?" she asked. The entire square shifted, like a body adjusting its weight. Heads turned. Her father froze. Slowly he looked at her, the calm mask on his face beginning to crack at the edges. "Zuri," he said evenly, "this is not the time for childish questions about land disputes. We are addressing spiritual matters, not—" "The spiritual matter is that you stole it," Zuri cut in, feeling the words slice through the air. A gasp rippled through the crowd. "That land was given to her late husband by the ancestors, and you used your position to take it when there was no man in her house to fight you. You promised a development project that never came. You put your name on the deed. You stood by the river and said it would forget." The fig tree shuddered. The leaves trembled, though the air was still. Her father's eyes were deadly. "This is slander," he said slowly. "You have no idea what you are talking about. That land was signed over under duress," Zuri pushed on, her throat burning. "I saw it yesterday." She hadn't, not physically, but she had felt it in the vision the river had shown her. The memory had settled in her bones like something she'd witnessed personally. "You and 2 elders cornered her. You told her if she refused, she would be cursed, that no one would help her. You said it was for the good of the village, but then you fenced it and kept it for yourself." Gasps turned into murmurs, murmurs into louder voices. People stared at her father. Some looked away, as if guilty of having suspected but never spoken. The fig tree suddenly boomed with a voice so loud everyone jumped. "He took it," it roared, the words rattling its branches. "He stood by the river and said it would forget. He poured palm wine and blood and asked for silence." Women clutched their wrappers. Children began to cry. The elders looked at Chief Adamu with a mixture of horror and recognition. They had been there. They had watched. Some had taken small benefits themselves. Her father's face finally split open, not physically but in expression. Rage, fear, humiliation, and something like wounded pride flashed across it. "Trees do not talk," he shouted, but his voice had lost its firmness. "This is madness. Some enemy has cursed us." Zuri stepped closer, her hands shaking but her gaze unwavering. "You said the same thing to the river when you nailed Maziwa to that rock," she said quietly, her words somehow carrying across the whole square. "You called truth madness. You bought silence, but debt always comes." The ground beneath them vibrated, a low rumble like distant thunder. Cracks began to creep along the walls of the chief's compound nearby, thin lines spidering outward, like something underneath was pushing up. People screamed and stepped back as pieces of plaster flaked off. A waterline appeared along one of the cracks, seeping through the wall, drawing a single shining sentence before everyone's terrified eyes. "Land is not yours." The whispers at the well grew louder all at once, as if some invisible barrier had broken. People clapped their hands over their ears. Some fell to their knees. "Make it stop!" someone cried. "We will all be ruined," another shouted. Zuri turned in a slow circle, seeing not just her father's shame, but the fear on her neighbors' faces. She realized the cost was bigger than him. The river wasn't just coming for one man, it was coming for the entire village's way of living in half-truths. For a moment, guilt stabbed her. Had she done the right thing? Maziwa's voice slid into her mind like cool water. "Truth does not ruin what is honest," the mermaid whispered. "It only breaks what was already broken and pretending not to be." Her father pointed a shaking finger at her. "You," he snarled. "You have been going to the river, haven't you? You have been consorting with spirits. You brought this on us." "No," Zuri said, and her voice had a strange calm. "You brought this on us years ago. I am just the one who stopped pretending not to see it." The fig tree creaked approvingly, its leaves rustling like applause. Somewhere, a small child laughed, not understanding but delighted by the drama. The second rope around Maziwa's waist, miles away at the river, snapped in a silent burst of blue light. In that moment, far beyond the square, the water surged, rising higher than usual along the banks, licking at the roots of palm trees, whispering faster. In people's homes, private hidden things began to tremble. A woman's diary fell from its hiding place behind a clay pot. A stash of stolen coins rolled out from beneath a floorboard. Love letters thought burned years ago reappeared, ink intact in the middle of a husband and wife's bed. Secrets were no longer content to stay where they had been shoved. As panic and accusations erupted in the square, Zuri stood very still, feeling both exposed and strangely anchored. Her father's house was cracking, physically, spiritually, socially. People were no longer looking at him with pure respect. There was suspicion now, anger, betrayal. Yet beneath the chaos, something like relief hummed through the village. Soft but real. The lie was breaking, the mask was slipping, and for the first time the village was seeing its chief as a man, not a flawless statue. "It has begun," Maziwa's voice said in her mind, both solemn and satisfied. "One more rope remains, tied not to land, not to power, but to the secret that sits at the center of your life. When that one breaks, the river will be fully free, and so will you, or you will drown in what is revealed." Zuri looked at her father, who suddenly seemed smaller than she had ever seen him. She didn't know yet whether she would forgive him, whether the village would, but she knew this: the story they had all been living, of a wise chief, a quiet river, a harmless past, was over. A new story was being born in pain and confusion, and its final chapter would not be written until she faced the question that had been living in her bones for years, the one she had only half spoken. Who am I really, and whose child am I? That night, the village did not sleep. Lamps burned in compounds long after midnight as couples argued. Parents questioned children, siblings accused one another. The river's whispers filled the spaces between sentences, repeating words people had hoped would never be heard again. In some homes there were tears of relief as long-held burdens spilled out at last. In others there was rage, denial, and the sharp sound of doors slamming. Zuri walked through it all like a ghost, hearing pieces of confessions float on the air. Yes, I loved him before I married you. I took the goat, I thought we would starve. It was my fault the child fell. I was tired and closed my eyes. The village was bleeding truth. And at the center of it all, her father's compound sat like a wounded animal, lights blazing, voices harsh inside. Zuri stood outside the gate, listening to the muffled shouting. Her mother's voice rose, shrill and desperate, her father's low and furious. She heard her own name like a slap thrown across the night. "She is not going back to that river," he roared. "I forbid it." "You do not own her spirit, Adamu," her mother shouted back. "You tried to own the river, and look where that brought us." Zuri's heart clenched at the pain in her mother's words. She had never heard her speak to him like that. Their house, like the rest of the village, was cracking open. She could have walked in, tried to explain, to soothe, to pretend there was some gentle path through this, but she knew there wasn't. Some journeys a person takes alone, even if they are surrounded by noise, so she turned away and walked once more to Odo-Ajo. The river glowed faintly under the moon, which seemed thinner tonight, like it too had shed something. Maziwa awaited her in the same place, still bound to the rock, but most of the ropes now hung uselessly, dim as old cobwebs. Only one remained bright and tight, wrapped around her chest like a band, digging into her ribs. "You have done what few would dare," the mermaid said as Zuri stepped into the water. "Your village will never be the same. Some will curse your name, others will secretly bless you, but there is still one more debt to settle, one more knot tying your life to a lie." Zuri waited close, the water cool and strangely comforting around her legs. "You mean my father," she said. The word tasted uncertain. Maziwa nodded. "You freed the land. You broke the bargain of silence. But at the heart of your story is a secret that has been killing you slowly for years. The truth of your origin. Until that is spoken, you will never stand fully in your own name. You will always be half shadow, half daughter, stuck between loyalty and resentment." Zuri swallowed. "What if the truth hurts my mother?" she whispered. "What if it breaks her?" The mermaid's eyes were infinitely old. "Truth does not break what is real," she said. "It only scatters illusions. Your mother is stronger than you think. She has carried this secret alone for a long time. You think you are the only one in pain?" Zuri thought of her mother's tired eyes, the way she always grew tense when people praised Chief Adamu for being a good father, the way she sometimes looked at Zuri with a mixture of love and something like apology. Maybe the secret had been sitting on her chest like a stone all these years. "What do I have to do?" Zuri asked, her voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of water. "The river has already shown you pieces," Maziwa replied. "Now it will show you the whole. But you must be willing to see, to accept, and then to speak it aloud in front of the one who denied it. Only then will the final rope break." Zuri nodded, though fear clawed her insides. "I am ready," she lied, and the river appreciated the attempt so much it almost believed her. Maziwa reached out with her bound hands. "Place your forehead against mine," she instructed. Zuri leaned in, the mermaid's skin cool and smooth against hers. The moment they touched, the world inside Zuri turned inside out. Suddenly she was not in her body but watching another woman's story unfold. She saw her mother, years younger, standing by the river at dusk, her belly flat, her laughter freer. She was talking to a man waist-deep in the water, a fisherman with strong arms, gentle eyes, and a smile that crinkled the corners of his face. "You and this river," he teased. Sometimes I think you love it more than you love me. Maybe I do, her mother replied with a grin, splashing water at him. The river listens to me when you are busy chasing fish. He caught her hand and pulled her close. I listen, he murmured. I hear your heart. One day we will have a child who loves both water and story, who walks between worlds. The vision shifted abruptly. The same man now lay on a mat, feverish, sweat pouring off him. People muttered about river spirits and sickness. He had gone to fish on a night the elders warned against, desperate to feed his family. A storm had risen suddenly. He came back with a cough that burned his lungs. Zuri's mother knelt at his side, tears streaming. Hold on, she begged. You can't leave me. You said our child. He pressed a hand to her belly, though there was no sign of life there yet. The river owes us, he wheezed. If I cannot stay, it will send you that child. Don't let anyone take her away from herself. He died that night, and Zuri felt an ache for a man she had never met but whose soul felt like a missing piece inside her. The vision shifted again. Her mother, alone and grieving, stood at the riverbank some months later, her belly now beginning to swell. Chief Adamu appeared beside her, younger than Zuri knew him but already wrapped in ambition like a cloak. The village is talking, he said. You are carrying the child of a man who died with debts and no land. Your name will be dragged through the mud. Let me marry you. Let my name cover you and the child. I will raise her as my own. People will respect you again. You only want more land, her mother snapped. You want control of his farm. I want stability, he replied smoothly. For you, for the child. I can give her opportunity. Education, status. What can a dead fisherman give her? Her mother's face twisted with grief and anger. He gave her spirit, she said. He gave her a place in this river. A place in the river won't feed her, Adamu argued. Think carefully. The river holds nothing but secrets and danger. My house holds power. Eventually, worn down by loneliness, fear, and the whispers of the village, Zuri's mother said yes. But as she did, she turned to the river and whispered, so softly no one but water could hear, do not forget whose child she really is. Even if the world calls her Adamu's daughter, you know she belongs to the man you took too soon. Give her courage to find herself when the time comes. The vision shattered like a gourd hitting stone. Zuri staggered back, gasping, the cold night air slamming into her lungs. Tears she hadn't felt forming streamed down her cheeks. So, she whispered, he is not my father, not by blood. No, Maziwa said gently, he is the man who gave you his name and his house, but the river and a fisherman whose heart beat like yours gave you your soul. Both truths live in you. The pain you have felt all these years was your spirit trying to reconcile a story that never fully fit. Zuri sank to her knees in the water, hands pressed to her face. It hurt. And yet it also felt like someone had finally opened a window in a room she'd been suffocating in. The question that had haunted her had an answer now, sharp but clean. What do I do with this? She asked through her fingers. You bring it into the light, Maziwa replied. You speak it where it has never been spoken before, in front of the man who denied it and the woman who buried it. Not to shame them, but to free all of you from the lie. Then the final rope will break and the river will be fully awake, and so will you. They will hate me, Zuri whispered. Maybe, the mermaid agreed. Or maybe they will finally stop pretending. Truth does not guarantee love. It only guarantees clarity. But if you refuse, you will always live as a shadow in your own life, forever wondering why your spirit doesn't fit the story you were given. Zuri stood slowly, water dripping from her clothes, hair plastered to her neck. For the first time, she felt the river as something not just outside her, but in her veins. She belonged to it as much as it belonged to the village. She was the child of a man whose name might never be spoken with honor at meetings, but whose love for her mother and for this water had carved a path that led to her. Tomorrow, she said, voice hoarse but steady, I will speak, and if the village breaks, let it break honestly. Maziwa's eyes shone with something like pride. When you do, she said, come back to me, because when I am free, the river will need a new kind of guardian, one who walks on land but hears water. This story is not just about what your village owes, it is about what you are meant to become. As Zuri walked back toward the village, the whispers thinned, as if the river itself was waiting, holding its breath for the final unveiling. Above her, the moon slipped behind a cloud, and for a moment everything was dark. But inside her, a new light had been lit. A harsh one, yes, but real. It would not let her sleep. It would not let her pretend. It would carry her into a morning where her name would be torn apart and sewn back together again, this time in the right shape.